Let's date forever. Here's your weekly dose of relationship fuel with Sammy and Nathan Yeager. Hello and welcome to Date Forever. In this week's episode, we're chatting about positive psychology and how this differs from positive thinking, the 6 pillars to our well-being, and the 4 levels of listening. But before we dive into that, Sammy, what's been fueling you up this week?
The thing that fueled me up the most was getting out in the sun. I am almost positive that my soul is solar powered because time in the sun just feels so good. I went for a surf on Saturday morning with one of my girlfriends who was visiting from Adelaide at beautiful Bondi Beach. It was her first time there, her first time there for a surf. So that was really, really nice to do. But then you and I got a heap of time at the beach. We did coastal walks. We did a bit of rock pool exploring. And we also had a really nice date night. That was not in the sun, but we had a really nice dinner
we did.
Together. Went out for a degustation, which was gifted to us almost a year ago. You would think with our at least 2 dates a month that we would have got there sooner than this, but it was it was the right time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Definitely was.
So I had quite a few things fuel me up. There's a couple of tanks that are feeling the opposite of full at the moment that need a little bit of love, particularly as I'm coming to the end of a couple of projects like for my business and a couple of my clients. It's feeling like I'm pouring fuel in there and it's leaking out as fast as I'm pouring it in, which I'm sure everybody can relate to that feeling where you feel like you're running on a treadmill and not really actually getting anywhere. But let's swing this back in the positive.
Yeah.
What about you, Nath? What fueled you up? Which tank got some fuel this week?
So I think mine was our romantic relationship tank, and I'm just spending some really good quality time with you. So I feel like we had a few things over the weekend. So you touched on a couple that we went on a really nice date night on Saturday night. And then also spent some quality time together at the beach and being out in the sun. But one of the other things that was really nice that we did together was watch a scary movie for spooky season.
Oh my gosh, I do love a spooky season moment.
Yeah, I feel like that we have to be in the right mood for it though. Quite often we're like, no, we won't do it. And then it was really nice to actually watch a scary movie with you again, a bit of a horror film.
Yeah, and TikTok had us on the top 10 scariest movies of all time as measured by science.
Yeah.
And they'd done all this research on people's heart rates and response and breathing and stuff like that. And we watched, was it number 5?
Number 5, I think it was.
Oh my gosh, we had to pause a few times because I was and then I had to make Nath go and get me a water from the kitchen because I was too scared to go in there by myself. That was really fun, actually.
Yeah, but we had some good, fun banter in the middle as well, trying to work out what was going on and what was going to happen next and stuff like that. And then we got to the end of the movie and we were both very confused. And so we had to go
It was
into
a
the
good
deep
movie.
dive. Yeah.
But it was even better once I understood what was happening.
Yeah.
We went on the YouTube afterwards for the explainer.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, doing something fun and novel that we hadn't done for a while definitely added some fuel for me too.
Yeah, it did.
And happy spooky season, everyone.
But now, here's this week's guest.
Today we're welcoming Alison Gault. She is a qualified positive psychology coach, wellbeing strategist and speaker. Alison specialises in helping busy professional women to build a life full of happiness, energy and freedom by tapping into the power of positive psychology. Alison is an adoring mama and partner, passionate gender equalist, dog parent, lover of travel, slight geek and lifelong learner. Welcome to the show, Alison.
Thank you so much for having me. I am excited to be here.
We are so grateful to have you here.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we've covered in your bio is what this show is all about, is about learning how to create a really beautiful, fueled up life for yourself, and being intentional about your time and your energy, and taking care of yourself first, while nurturing your relationship with the most important people in your world. So I'm curious, how did you get curious about positive psychology and how did you end up in this as a career path?
Yeah, it feels like something that you should be able to talk about in a nutshell, right? But there's so many moments in your career and life that lead you to the space you come to. And for me, I started out in a corporate career with change management. So I was always supporting people and organisations, teams and leaders through times of change and transition. And as I moved through that career, I ended up moving into executive leadership coaching. And I loved it, just the time of connecting with someone, of really making a difference and being able to see the difference that you made. I loved it. And so I studied coaching psychology back when I was living in London. And that's what I was doing. But I realised that there was something that was missing. So I'm working with all these great executives, like really CEOs and executive level aspiring leaders, and something was missing. We were talking about values and how they can be productive and set goals. But somehow they were getting burnt out and they were stressed. And even in my own life, I could feel that I was coming home and my partner, Philippe, and I, we were collapsing on the couch in the evening, maybe with a glass of wine in hand, watching mindless TV. And I was like, there's a better life here, right? There's something better. And so me being me, because I'm a bit of a geek, I decided to study positive psychology and to see how this can apply to my work with my executive clients and also to my own life. So I decided to do my master's in applied positive psychology, which was really intense but fabulous, and I found my groove. I knew this was my place. But what was really interesting, I remember this real moment of epiphany when I was sitting in a lecture theatre and I thought, all of these, there's so much research in positive psychology literally around the world over the last 20-odd years, because it's relatively new science. But people like us, we don't have it to hand. We're not learning it at school. It's not being taught in organisations. And so I was like, I knew then and there that my absolute mission in life was to bridge that gap, to bring that science of positive psychology and living well, finding happiness and energy, living with that vitality and freedom, that was possible. And if I can bring that to people, as many people as I can, then that's what it's all about. And so that's really how it all sort of came to be. And it drives me. Every morning I get up and I'm so excited to do what I do.
Yeah, I love that. So Alison, can you give us the little 1 minute elevator pitch of what positive psychology is actually all about?
Yeah, sure. So positive psychology is a relatively new arm of science, of psychology. It's always been known or recognised as a field of research and need. So effectively, psychology, if I just give you a quick history, this is the geek in me, right? Psychology, after the Second World War, we were talking about, it really focused a lot of research and time and energy on how to support people who were unwell. And we kind of forgot about the people who are well and who would really love to live a flourishing, great life. So how do they live their best life? And so we kind of forgot that in the sort of drive to support people who are unwell. And then in about 2000, there was a big movement, predominantly in the US, towards, okay, let's refocus some energy on how do we support people to be well. And the language we use is flourishing. How do we help people to really flourish? And so there was a lot of funding and investment and research that went in from about the year 2000 into how do we support that well-being. And positive psychology as a science is becoming increasingly known as well-being science. And that's because it's bringing together lots of knowledge and research and thought process to support people to do really well in their life. And that's what it's about effectively. Does that help?
Yes, but I would like you to draw a delineation between the difference of positive thinking and positive psychology.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there, because some people do say to me, oh, if you're a positive psychologist, you must just be happy all the time. It's my so, and you're like, well, I'm a fairly optimistic and happy person, but I'm not, I'm a natural human being. I also have sadness and frustration. Positive thinking is really important. It can be argued that it's an aspect of positive psychology, because what we tell ourselves, how we speak to ourselves, and how we treat ourselves with kindness or lack of can influence our mindset and our approach to life. So that positive thinking is a thing, and it could fit within the broader range of positive psychology. But positive psychology is a deeply robust science-based area of research and learning that becomes increasingly applicable to people's lives. So it's much broader than that, and it is a deep, very rigorous research-oriented science.
In your conversation before about talking about how you arrived at this place and realizing that there was all this research being done and that you wanted to become a vessel for taking those research papers into real world application. There's probably like one person that I can think of in my sphere, and this is a reflection of who I hang out with, that would read a research paper for fun. Most people would take the headline that the media outlet has taken from that research paper, or the one or two anecdotes from the paper, and reference that as, oh, I read a research paper, not having read the entire thing. But I'm really curious, like, what was it about positive psychology and the research that you were uncovering that was so surprising to you that you were like, oh my gosh, I must share this?
It's a really good question, Sammy. And I think it's there are particular concepts and theories that I particularly love. But the thing that I notice really well, and particularly because I did coaching in psychology, is I'm not really into the woo-woo. So when someone's saying, you can, I don't know, have purple crystals in your sphere and that's going to somehow, you're going to be happy and live a great life.
Put them out in the moon.
Yeah, and you're just like...
The full moon to recharge. I'm a little bit woo, but I'm not dancing naked under the full moon with my crystals.
What?
No. I've not spent enough time in Byron Bay for that, but I'm a little bit woo.
You've got plenty of life left.
Yeah. I think there's a space for woo, right? And it's, as long as we recognise that that's the fun, right? And that's where we play. But in terms of how we support people, I'm all about where is the evidence. I want to know if we're going to invest our really precious energy and time and emotion, where can we invest it with some confidence that it's going to really support our greatest life? And so for me, that's where I want to know what the research tells us, who it's going to apply for, who it's going to apply to, and how we can apply it in our life. That for me is where the science comes in. And so that's why I get really geeky around, I'll dig under the research and say, well, who is that applying to? And not just everybody is going to have the same experience and do the same thing. So it's very individual, our wellbeing, as you can imagine. But where do we play? So where do we invest our time and our energy? Because it's increasingly precious. Like, we don't have a lot of time and energy in this world, and we have one life. So how do we invest it best to live the greatest life we can? For me, that's what it's about.
So what are some of the key pillars of positive psychology that we should probably get familiar with and start to build habits around? I'm
really glad you asked, because there are a whole load of models around positive psychology and wellbeing, and some of them I find are really darn complex and pretty hard to access. So there are some things that I think we can all do to support our wellbeing, and we can do it tomorrow, and it's free, and it doesn't necessarily take a lot of time. Mm-hmm. One of those things, in fact, two of those things are going to be really obvious. So invest in your sleep. So your sleep is critical. It is the linchpin of your wellbeing. If you're not sleeping well, everything else sort of has a flow-on effect.
Alison, Nathan and I are sitting here shamefully smirking because that's the thing that we're the worst at. And it's your number one.
Well, it's important, right?
Yes.
But it's never too late to try and to change these things. Like, that's important to know too. And no judgment, right? So life is busy and we don't always get to do all the stuff, but as long as we know where we can best invest our energy, then that's the important thing, right?
I think we've invested in the quality of sleep, just not the quantity. I think that's the trouble.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, sleep.
Yeah. Yep.
So far, 0 marks.
Okay.
Half marks.
Half marks.
Fun counts as well, right? And physical movement. So that doesn't have to be going to the gym every day. It needs to be regular through the day. So it's using stand-up desks, which I know you guys do. Yeah. And it's stepping away from your desk at regular intervals, right? So if we can do that, we know that that's going to be really, really helpful.
If I can share a personal story on the stand-up desk, because I know people think this is a bit wanky and a bit woo-woo, whatever. But having a stand-up desk has literally changed my life. And I that's not hyperbole. Like, I was dealing with an injury that I'd had for over 5 years, and I finally found a good chiropractor who just made the suggestion. He's like, tell me a bit about how you're living your life, how you're moving, what are you doing every day? And he was the first person who'd asked me, like, what's your desk set up like? And I explained it. He's like, yeah, I really think you should invest in a stand-up desk. And this was probably it's 3 years ago.
Yeah, maybe even longer.
Maybe
than that.
even longer. Yeah, and I am now, that injury is almost non-existent. I am back running and I don't even have an office chair in my office. So I'm a huge advocate for the stand-up desk. Your energy is better, you move better, everything. Breath is better.
I just need to pot that and tell all my clients about that.
I'm happy to be a case study.
Just listen to this podcast at like 15 minutes in. Yeah.
And you will live a better life. And it's true. So what you're talking about there, so we know we have really recent and strong research around sedentary is the new smoking, right? Sedentary, sitting at our desk, sitting on the couch watching TV, whatever that looks like, really, really bad for our health, for our physical health. And we know that our physical health and our psychological health are intrinsically linked. So there's no separation between the two. We used to think that there was. We know now that there isn't. So what you're doing there, stand-up desk, is one of the key things we can do to be anti-sedentary in our day, in our work day. Because the reality is we are in front of computer screens a lot of us are. So how do we make sure that we're still able to be physically moving? So if I come back to some of the other really critical factors, one that I love, because I think that we ignore it too often, is connecting with nature. So how we get into nature is absolutely important for our well-being, our psychological health. And I don't mean walking with our AirPods in and walking, out in the local park. But if you can connect with nature by even sitting in your garden or an open space, the beach, the park, wherever it looks like, for 15 minutes, you will derive benefit to your physical health, to your creativity, to your thought process, to decongesting your mind. So connecting with nature.
I'm full of stories today. So during lockdown, during the intensive period of being locked in our home within a 5K radius, government mandated lockdown, this was the thing that I struggled with probably the most, was like, I felt like I was going insane because our 5K radius, we had 2 ovals, like just normal soccer pitch round, and then a small park that had a dog park adjacent. And I was quite literally walking around and around and around and around in circles for months. And I honestly felt like I was going insane. I was like, I need to see a mountain. I need to see an ocean. I need to see some trees that are not groomed by council. It was one of the things that I didn't realize I had injected into my life that had been taken away. And as a result, we actually ended up moving out. We moved out of the area. We've moved to the beach. And now I access a large body of water and a coastal walk.
Bushland really close as well.
Bushland close every day.
Yep. And it's that old saying, isn't it? Sometimes you don't miss something until it's taken away.
Yeah.
You just sharing the lived experience of when you take away something we know is critically important for us, and then you re-inject it back and you feel so much better for it, right?
Yeah.
Whatever that looks like. So, but we know it doesn't have to take hours of walking in a forest and doing, total forest bathing in order to get the benefit from it. So nature, people balk at this one, but a meditative practice, whatever that looks like, is super supportive. There's loads of science. We've known, a lot of people know about it, but some people find it difficult to access or think, when I talk to clients, they're like, I can't do that. But there are simple ways of doing it. I would put that on the list. I've got 6, just to be clear. So, and another one is feeling the positive. And again, this is another field of research around positive emotions, which is amazing. Positive, even tiny little, we call them micro moments of positive emotion, love, joy, calm, contentment, full range of energies, something that is positive. If we have even tiny moments of those and we experience those frequently, they build and build. And so we have this increasing spiral of happiness. It also supports other things like, for example, one study in the US showed that people who experience more positive emotions are much less likely to be racist because we're able to see the bigger picture, right? And we're open to other thought processes. So that's just one aspect, just by seeking and experiencing positive emotions in whatever that looks like for individuals, right? And then the last one, which is really related to what we're talking about, is connecting with other people. We know how important that is for our psychological well-being and our happiness. It's kind of intuitive, right? But there's 2 key kinds of how we connect with other people. One is that deep, authentic relationship. So we can define that by who are the people that you're going to call on when stuff goes wrong? Who are the people that are going to step forward to help you out? That's that deep, authentic relationships, and particularly our intimate partners. And then the other kind of relationship which supports longevity is that what I call incidental relationships. So that's the conversation with your barista or someone at the supermarket or saying hi to a neighbour who you don't know very well. That's really important they've shown that that's the number one factor for longevity, even more than our intimate relationships. So those small little chit-chats that you have as you're going about your life, those are really important for our well-being as well. So that's probably those things.
Alison, you'll probably know the exact study and you'll have all of the stats and the reference points and all of that, the stuff that I'm not very good at. But I remember reading a study around those incidental relationships and how they are very, very different in large cities versus small country towns, and that we really, really struggle to have those incidental relationships in big cities. It's almost like we run out of empathy for just the sheer volume of people that we interact with on a normal commute, from walking from home to the station, onto the train, out of the station to the office, and then around again. Like, you might have hundreds of potential incidental interactions versus in a country town or a smaller suburb where that might be less. So I remember reading about, the level of empathy that's required and how exhausting that can be, but that we actually have less of them when we live in high density populated areas.
Yeah. And Sammy, what you're absolutely spot on there. And the other thing that also has increasingly impacted our ability to have those incidental relationships is our technology. Right? So if you think about when you're on a train or when you're walking the dog or whatever along the beach or whatever it is, how often are you doing it with your headphones in? Or how often do you see people, even at restaurants, who are even with their families and friends and they're on their devices? And I just think, we are eroding our own well-being just with technology in the wrong setting. And so I think we lose our situational awareness and our opportunity for incidental conversations or, whatever that looks like, so brutally when we are focused solely on our devices. It's just uncomfortable.
Nathan and I are both millennials. We're in our now we're in our mid-30s. We're not early 30s anymore. We're in our mid-30s, and I find this quite abrasive, and it's something that I've been probably more aware of post-lockdown, post-COVID, back out in the real world, is our inability to share stories without supporting medium. It's like you'll be sitting at a dinner table with a group of people and it will take minutes before someone's like, oh yeah, let me show you the photos, or oh yeah, let me show you the video, or let me show you this thing that I saw. Like, we're almost losing the ability to communicate without those modalities supporting it. It's like, paint me a word picture, take me on a journey with you. It's like, oh no, here, just watch the video.
Yeah, and I think there's a trend which I love personally, because I don't hate all technology. I just like it in the right context, right? But where you go into restaurants and they have a lockbox at the door of the restaurant. Yeah. So they're forcing people to connect over their dinner or their meal or whatever. And I just think, we need more of that, just to encourage people to connect more meaningfully with each other and to have proper communicated, authentic feelings and situations and stories, like you've just said, Sammy, that really connect us more deeply with each other. It's really, it's so simple. Put the device in a box and lock it so you can have a conversation, you get it back.
Yeah. All right, so we've got sleep, movement, connecting with nature, having some sort of meditative practice, feeling the positive, the love, the joy, the calm, and connecting with other people, both in a deep and authentic way, but also those incidental relationships. Is there any tools or frameworks that you can recommend for, like, maybe whichever one you think has the most juice for the squeeze? Like, if people can get, have a quick win that's going to have a really big impact, which one would you recommend they dial in on? It's going to be sleep, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say, go to bed. I call those the wellbeing fundamentals, right? So that's my model of wellbeing, and that's what I promote and support, because I think people can access that and understand it relatively intuitively. But, I will go back to sleep is the linchpin of our wellbeing. Without it, we kind of know, we've all had the times where our sleep has been disturbed for whatever reason, not always within our span of control, but if we just ask ourselves if we're getting between 7 and 9 hours of good quality sleep, that will set us up completely differently to when we have less than that. And there are a couple of super simple things we can do to support the sleep, which some people are uncomfortable with. Most of my clients are like, what? So there's the number one thing that I would suggest that people do, and particularly in this day and age, coming back to that technology conversation we just had, if we can cut all blue light for 90 minutes before our bedtime, that will make a difference.
We suck at that.
Yeah. Most people, that's their opportunity to be scrolling. Or when we're tired, we collapse in front of the TV, right?
Yeah.
And it's natural. We're tired and we think that that's relaxing and we think that that's downtime. But I will say it is anti-relax, anti-downtime, because it's stimulating our brain and the chemicals and it's suppressing our production of melatonin, which we know is critically important for our sleep and our quality of our sleep. So if we can just cut the blue light for 90 minutes, and if 90 minutes is too long for people, then start with 60.
Oh, I'm going to have to start with 20. And then, yeah.
I have had a few clients who have said, can I start with 30? Baby steps towards it. But if we can get to 90 minutes, that will make a massive difference to both the duration and the quality of our sleep.
Awesome. So, Alison, if we're nailing all of those pieces of your fundamental wellbeing pillars of positive psychology, I'm really curious, like, what are some of the things, the habits and practices that you've got in your own relationship with yourself to keep it fueled up?
Yeah, Sammy, and a lot of people think, oh, well, because you know all of this stuff, you must do it all the time, like every day. I live that full busy life, just like everybody else. So it's always a juggle. What do I fit in and what do I not? What I will say is, I invest in my sleep. Like, you know, I can't talk about that really often enough. I do try to hit each of those wellbeing fundamentals, if not daily, within each of every few days. One of the things that I do in the mornings is I walk the dog along the beach for an hour. And that for me is it hits my physical movement and it also hits my my access to nature. It sets me up really well for the day. And I set myself an intention for my day. So what am I expecting of myself? How am I going to show up in my day? And that can really that helps me to make my choices and set my boundaries for the day, which can be really important when I'm trying to support myself. So if I'm just tapping into what I need from myself in that moment, then I know that, for example, today might not be the day where I'm just going to be running hell for leather. It might be a day where I just step back or I'm stepping away from the desk outside of the house more frequently than I might otherwise. So those are probably two of the things that I do that really impact me, that I do every day. But I do other things, like I go to the gym as often as I can just to get that physical movement. I do meditate. I have a particular meditative practice that works for me, which I do in the evenings. And I journal. I'm a big fan of journaling because it can support both reflection, but it also, particularly when you do it just before bed, so you know that 90-minute sleep window I was talking about, that's a really good opportunity for journaling. I mean like pen and paper, right? Not on a blue light device. But there's a really good practice which I do and I recommend to pretty much everybody, which is with a pen and paper writing down 3 of the positive things from that day. So 3 simple things, and it doesn't have to be big. We didn't win $1 million today, but we did hear a beautiful bird or we noticed the first daffodil of the season, so spring might be here soon. And if we write those down, it's really simple. It doesn't have to be what we're grateful for, just 3 positives. If we do that for about 14 days, we know that we will feel happier. But also when we do things before bed, so things that we go to sleep on, those emotions are exaggerated when we wake up on them, which is really powerful. So you know that old saying about don't go to sleep on an argument? Yeah. It holds true with the science, right? So the emotion we go to sleep on, it's exaggerated in the morning. So if we can go to sleep on a really positive, calm note, then guess what? We're going to wake up in a much more positive, calm space. So we're better ready to tackle our day, whatever that brings.
Yeah, I love that.
All right, so we're getting 0 marks on the sleep, but we are getting 10 out of 10 marks for the gratitude practice because we've been doing that one for years. Yeah. And we have that conversation and that reflection time every night as we're going to bed. Yeah. What are you grateful for today? Yeah.
And then almost every morning you're getting on the beach and walking the dog as well. So
yeah. I lose points because I do headphones. I do read. I listen to audiobooks and podcasts in that time. That's my content consumption, knowledge growth. So maybe I should just commit to like 1 day a week to start with. That it's sans headphones.
Yeah, and no judgment. But we know that when we allow our mind to, we call it meander. So it just sort of goes where it needs to go. That's where sometimes, particularly the things that we allow our subconscious to tackle overnight while we're sleeping, those are the moments that it comes in. That's when we get the benefit from it, and that's where that creativity tends to arrive.
See, I get that when I'm in the ocean. I get that when I'm in the water and I can't touch the phone or the headphones or whatever. That works really well for me. And you're like, oh, let the mind meander. Mine's more like on the treadmill, maxed out speed. It's like, which probably indicates that I probably need some more mindful consumption. Yeah. All right, Alison, I want to change directions just a little bit to the connecting with other people part of positive psychology, because obviously, you know, you're on the Date Forever podcast. We talk about the quality of our relationships dramatically impacting the quality of our lives. And one of the anecdotal sort of pieces of advice that sometimes can feel a bit hollow on our show that we get is like communication is key. So we know that it is a really important pillar of our relationships, not only with ourselves and, like you said, that positive talk with ourselves, but also the quality of the communication, the questions that we ask our partners. So I'm really curious from your point of view if you've got any tips, tricks, tools that you can recommend to have really quality communication.
Yeah, thanks, Sammy. You touched on a real area of passion for me. We know that connection with other people is critically important, right? And we know what that feels like when we have it. And communication does get bandied around a lot around it, and it is because it is important, but that doesn't necessarily tell us how what can we use to communicate really well with each other, especially when we're in tricky times. If we're facing challenges, it can be hard to be investing time in listening to someone else. So there are a couple of things that I generally tend to recommend to people when we're communicating with others. But what I will say before I sort of share some of those things is, remember when you were on your first date? If we can listen to each other the way we did on those first dates. Remember when we do communications, learning and stuff, we're often told to, nod our head and say, yes. And we're sometimes told to reflect back the questions. Oh, yes, so what I heard you say is this. And you see, we didn't do that when we were on our first date, and we were just genuinely, authentically listening to someone because we were curious about what they were doing and who they are and where our points of connection are. So if we can remember that, the premise, that is the foundation for how we listen, and how we connect with each other and how we communicate. So if we can sort of just come back to that and go, well, we did do it once, so we can do it again, right? So that's how we want to listen to each other. But there's a few different levels of listening, which I think when we can be aware of, and we can ask ourselves, at what level am I listening to my partner at this moment in time, or whoever I'm speaking with? So if you can imagine like a triangle at the very top of the pyramid, we have closed mind, and that's kind of obvious, isn't it? Like someone's asking you a question and it's not even filtering through, you're busy doing whatever you're doing. So that's probably not the level of listening we really want to be aiming for. We have open mind, which is when we talk about communication, that tends to be where we stop, and that is I hear and I act. So my partner's saying to me, could you just put the rubbish out for me, please? And he's like, yes, and you go and put the rubbish out. Okay, congratulations, you've hit open mind. How about open heart, which is the next deeper level of listening? And that is when we're willing to listen at an emotional level. So we're willing to be emotionally moved by what we hear. So the classic example of that is we're watching a movie and it's very sad and we cry because we're engaging with that movie and we're crying with it, right? So, and then the next deepest level, which is really the one we want to be aiming for, is what we call open will, or I call open opportunity, because this is where the real gold is. And this is where we listen to each other. We might have a predisposed idea of what we want to do. So the question might be, can you take the rubbish out? But when we listen at this level, we are more attuned to what sits behind the question. So someone might be asking us to take the rubbish out, but what they're really doing is saying, I'm struggling and I need some help. So can you step forward and help me out? And that's where we're willing to do something different to what we might otherwise. So we're not just, taking the rubbish out and sitting back and doing whatever we're doing. We're not just engaging emotionally and we're saying, okay, I think that person's a bit stressed, but we're not doing anything about it. The next step is I'm willing to do something different because I can hear and I can see that they're doing, I'm listening at the deepest possible level. I'm asking almost the question underneath the question. underneath what they're saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That sounds like most of us probably operate towards the top of the triangle most of the time.
Sitting on phones and things like that, and being distracted by other things, and yeah, and
we're not listening to each other. And when we lose that ability to listen, we lose that ability to connect with where that other person is at, both emotionally and in their life and in their situation, right? So just being aware of it, and even having the communication, even sharing that with our partner, and so we can say, what level are you listening at, right? Like I feel like you're at closed mind, man, right? I need you to be here, even at open heart. We don't always have to be at open will, but like just being aware of where we're at and noticing when we're hearing somebody else. And then the other thing is that's really important, particularly when we've got big conversations to have, if we're goal setting or if we're checking in with our goals. I know you guys have a quarterly goal conversation. It's asking those simple but profound questions, which are, what is important? Really, what's important here? What is possible? So allowing our creative conversation around, okay, so not just problem solving, but what would great look like in this space? And then what am I committing to? So not can we do, what am I committing to make that happen? And that is really key. If we can start off with that, what's important, even if we kind of think we know it, when we're saying it and we're stating it, that will bring us back to where we're at and why we're having this conversation, what our priorities are, what's possible. Well, you know, the world is our oyster and we have so much choice available to us. And then, okay, what am I committing to make that happen, to move that forward? That can be a really nice, simple set of questions that can again lead to a really profound connection and support our communication at a much deeper level.
I think this is really interesting because even as you were describing that triangle, it's pretty easy to do a little self-diagnostic and a little reflection of like, where am I operating at most of the time in most of my relationships? And I like that invitation because I would suggest that most people would consider themselves to be okay, good, or great at communicating. I don't think anyone would ordinarily self-diagnose as, I'm actually not that great, but with a more sort of detailed framework of what good communication and good listening actually is at different levels, you can probably better assess what your gap might be.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because I could share a story with a really senior guy that I worked with in London, really super senior, and he said to me, Alison, I'm a great listener. You know, I hear all my team, and I did a bit of observational work with him. And what I found is he would wait until each of his team members, really senior people, had their say, had presented their view, and then he would step forward and he'd say, and what's on my mind is, and because he was the most senior guy in the room, it's like super senior, everyone would defer to whatever he said. And I said, well, what happens if you don't, or if you're willing to take on someone else's idea? And he came back to me and he tried it a little bit. It was a bit clunky to start with. But he said, Alison, for 40 years, I haven't been listening to people. And he went home and he started practicing with his wife. And she said to me, what's happened to you? You're listening to me. Because the biggest complaint he heard from his wife was that he never listened to her. And he said, oh my God, she actually said to me, you're listening to me. I said, he thought he was a great listener. He thought he was a great communicator. And he just didn't realize at what level he was operating at. As soon as he practiced it, his world changed.
Yeah, so that we can foster those actual deep connection. Yeah, and like you said, like not every conversation needs to be deep and, you know, highly empathetic. What does this mean? What are you really asking? We don't need to, you know, sometimes I do just want you to take out the rubbish, please.
Exactly. We'd be so exhausted.
But there probably is times where if I've asked you that, Nathan, a follow-up question of like, and what else could I help you with?
Well, it's probably just a bit of a self-reflection as well. Like if you're asking me to take the rubbish out, like a self-reflection of, actually, is there anything else I can do while I'm doing this? Or is there a reason behind asking this question?
Yeah. How else can I be of service?
Yeah.
I think if we both spent all of our time asking that of each other, we would have a pretty amazing relationship. I mean, it's pretty good now.
Well, and also the thing is, once you start to feel heard, you're more willing to share up front. So you're not saying, can you take the rubbish out and hoping that something else happens. You're saying, I really need some help. I'm feeling very stressed, because you're feeling confident and you know you're going to be heard at the level you need to be heard at. So it fosters, it's a building thing.
Yeah, and even just having the framework or the shared language of that triangle. Like, hey, I feel like you're at the top of the triangle. Can you come down a bit deeper? Even just simple things like that can create that level of same-pageness and, no, I understand what you're asking of me. All right, Alison, right at the beginning of the episode, you mentioned your partner. So I would love to know a little bit about your love story.
So Philippe and I have been, we realised that we've been together for nearly 13 years.
Wow.
Which feels extraordinary. So Philippe is French. We met when we were both living in London. He is a drummer by trade, so he's a professional musician. And we met at a party, and he was very, very French. And he still is. I told him if he loses his French accent, he's going to have to go back home for
go back for immersion training
again. Thanks. And so I would say it's kind of interesting, different to some of the relationships I've had in the past. Our relationship just built. So we didn't do that first. We're in love on the first day, and the life just sort of unfolded before us. Our relationship deepened and our love grew as we continued to connect with each other over time. And I have to say, the first year I was quite shocked that we made a year. Just like, how did this happen? And now we're, almost 13 years down the track, and we have, our life is intrinsically created together. So we continue to be deeply lucky and grateful for each other. And I'd say our relationship is built on support, and I would say we are good communicators. We have had moments where we're just like, messages are just crossing paths.
Missing each other. Yep.
Everybody does, but we're pretty good at fairly quickly saying, hey, this isn't how we want to operate. We need to have a different conversation, and this is how we're feeling. And so we have that language around our emotions as well, which is supportive for us.
Yeah. Mm. So are there any practices or rituals or anything that you've got in your relationship to keep it fueled up?
Yeah, we still do dates, and most of our time that is available for us to date is through the day, which sounds a bit weird, but just the nature of our life. So we went on a really impromptu lunch date just today. Unusual, because it very rarely happens, because we're just, hectic like everybody. But that was lovely. But then last week we went on a day date. So we have those probably, I want to say every couple of months, which doesn't sound very often. But every couple of months we have a day date where we spend the day doing something different. For example, last week we had our day date, and we went down to the springs, and we were in the hot water springs. We had this beautiful time there, and then went out for a lovely lunch at a lovely winery. And that was enough. We went for a walk along the beach at the end of the day, and it was just beautiful, just having that opportunity to connect. Of course, we had no technology with us, and we just had beautiful conversations and allowed ourselves to have space as well. That really supports us. And we also have a deal where we call it the 100 rule. And this is something that I discovered from Brené Brown, where the two of us between us, we create 100%.
I love where you're going with this. I've seen Brené Brown talk about this. So please, please share how you're using it. Well, what it is and how you're using it.
Yeah, the premise is that you each contribute to this 100%, and that 100% is what you need in order to function and do everything you need to be doing, right? And so naming where you're at, so recognizing positive intention with that withholding judgment, right? So I can say to Philippe one day, I'm like, I'm having a pretty tricky time. I'm at about a 40, right? I'm not meeting my 50, so I'm at about a 40. And he can say to me, I've got the other 60, so we are 100, so we can function forward. Another day, it might be a case of I'm 40, and he's saying, you know what, Al, I'm 40 as well. So we're like, ooh, okay, so we're only adding up to 80. So that 20, what are we going to do? We either call in the support network to bridge that gap, or something has to come off the plate, because we can't be supporting ourselves and living well if we're trying to grapple with that extra 20 gap. So we have those conversations, not daily certainly, but probably weekly. If we can see the schedule for the week, sometimes we can see that we're probably going to be depleted on certain days. So how are we going to manage that? So that really supports us in our conversations.
There's so much that I love about that framework. It's super simple. it's free. And it's accessible to you all the time in all communication formats, mediums, whatever. But I also really like that it shifts us away from this idea that relationships are meant to be 50-50, which to me, I don't ever want to be in a transactional relationship with Nath where I do this for you, therefore you do that for me. And that part, I want us to be very collaborative in nature. And sometimes that's going to mean that one of us is bringing to the table a higher percentage than the other. And I hope and I trust that that's going to ebb and flow naturally, organically, and it does. But I think the idea that we should be 50-50 all the time is just not it.
It's not realistic. And the other thing to avoid too, and this is why I hold to the lack of judgment and recognizing the positive intention. It's really easy to say, oh man, I'm at a 30. And the other person saying, well, hang on a second, I worked just as hard as you. And, I did all this other stuff as well. So I'm only a 30 as well. And you should be more than that. And you're like, well, hang on. Oof, we're just naming where it's at. And what can we do about it? We're not trying to attach judgment or, a competition to it. And it's easy to get into that when we take each other for granted and when we feel like we're doing too much and we're not really naming where we're at and listening to each other at that deeper level. That's what it's about, I think.
But I like what you said there too, that it doesn't need to be the two of you adding up to 100%, that you can get outside support and things like that. And so maybe it's not that one of us is cooking dinner. Maybe we just need to order some Uber Eats or something tonight. Or maybe there is, like, if you're looking over the week and you're going, all right, well, we're not going to have capacity to do our washing this week. Let's take it to the laundromat or let's get someone else to do that this week.
Or agree in the new standard of care. Like, this is a real life example. We've just come back from holidays and I have not unpacked my bag. It is still a pile on the floor 10 days later. Yep. And like I said to Nath about 5 days in, I was like, I am not going to get to that. That's going to be there for probably another week. Like, I'm aware of it. I know it, but I'm just dropping the standard of care right now because, I don't have bandwidth for that. That can wait. And I think about being explicit as opposed to Nath looking at that thing being like, oh, she bloody hasn't packed away her shit yet, still lying all over the floor. Like, I didn't ask for your permission. It was more just like, FYI, this is where I'm at with that.
Yeah. And I think this is the thing. In our everyday life, we have to hold things lightly. We say that a lot in coaching, right? We hold things lightly because as soon as we attach judgment and results to something, hold on to it too tight, then you know what, we're just setting ourselves up for failure. But the name of the game is pragmatism, right? Like, if we lose our ability to be pragmatic about our life, especially because we live, particularly in the Western world, we live busy, full lives based on this concept of chronos, which is basically it's time-bound, it's activity-based, it's results-oriented, versus this kairos, which is, we'll talk about this concept of meandering mind and holding space without time-bound or results, task orientation. If we're living in this chronos world, as we do, then if we're not pragmatic, then everything's going to fall over and the plates are going to be smashing around at our feet, not spinning happily in the air. So if we're not pragmatic, it's game over.
Yeah, and just what's our care plan for each other in our relationship when we are at and Nathan and I used like how full is your tank, or are you close to empty? That's the language that we use. What's the care plan if we're both low? And what's the action plan to put more fuel in the tank? How are we refueling? If it's our relationship, if it's our individual, it might be one of us supporting the other to have time on their own or whatever the thing might be. But I think those kind of, snapshots, moment in time, take a measurement, take a temperature check, it can be really, really helpful, especially if you do it often.
Well, yeah, often, and because it becomes habitual, right? And it becomes a known language, and we can anticipate and recognise much more quickly. And there's something else in that, and I love your analogy around filling the tank, or we talk about sometimes filling the bucket, whatever that analogy works for different people, but also recognising when you're contributing to someone else's tank, when you're offering energy and support and kindness to someone else, you are also filling your own tank. You are putting something in your own bucket. And that's really important because we know that, particularly with kindness, where there's a lot of science, when we're offering kindness to our partner or to someone, whatever that looks like, we're also deriving benefit from that from ourselves. So we're giving and we're also supporting ourselves in that as well. So it's a win-win, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not necessarily give-take.
Yeah.
No.
Alison, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a really beautiful conversation. I really appreciate your insights and letting me share my case study stories to back up your science. But to say thank you, we've given 100 days of medication to nursery school children in Ethiopia. This project is looked after by New Ways and has been made possible via our partnership with Buy One, Give One. So thank you so much for making that possible.
Thank you so much. This has been the most beautiful connection. I'm so glad that I've had the opportunity to share this time with you, and thank you so much for giving something back to the world. I think when we do that, we just make the world a better place, and it fills everybody's cup, right?
Yeah, that was one of the core ethos of starting this show is we want better relationships so that we can have a better world.
Exactly. And who can argue with that? The world needs to be a better place, and we can do it one bit at a time.
Yeah, that's it. So, Alison, if people want to connect with you or learn a little bit more about what you do, how can they do that?
Sure, Nate. I have a website, which is www.brightbluealmonds.com. That's how anybody can find me. I'm also on Instagram at Alison Gault Coaching, and that's where I share free tips and hints and all that sort of stuff. So feel free to reach out. I love having conversations, no obligation. I love it. I love talking about this stuff. Do you get that sense?
Yes, absolutely. Alison, do you work with individuals or just companies?
No, I work with individuals predominantly, and I support predominantly busy professional women these days. And that's really because I believe if I can lift women up and to live their greatest life, then the world is a better place, because we know that with each individual who lives their greatest thriving life, they have an impact on the people around them to 3 degrees. So people they haven't even met yet are feeling the positive of that as well.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much, Alison. Really appreciate it. And go check out all of the bits and pieces and start considering which of those psychology wellbeing pieces you could move the needle on.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.